Perhaps we shouldn't be surprised by politicians being loose with the truth, but I've got to say the sneakiness and the dishonesty with which the McGowan government has handled its plans to change and rewrite the rules of the way that elections are run in this state is like few things I've ever seen in covering politics for the last 15 years or so. In the lead up to the election, when it was very obvious that Mark McGowan was going to win government, he was repeatedly asked at press conferences by journalists about whether, in the event that he won a majority in the upper house, he would seek to rewrite the rules of that upper house. Here was one example on the 9th of March.
It's not on our agenda. I've asked this question. I've answered this question many times. It's not on our agenda.
It's not on our agenda, said Mark McGowan. And indeed, the Monday morning after the Saturday election win, I raised the issue with him again on this program.
I'm not going to change my answer at this point in time, Gareth. The answer I gave during the campaign stays.
But will you rule it out for the term?
Oh, well, I didn't rule it out during the campaign. I said it wasn't on our agenda. That is our current position.
So it's something that will likely be revived at some point between now and 2025.
Well, I'm not going to keep answering the question, but I've answered the question as best I can.
Well, it wasn't on the agenda until the moment that it was. It took all of 6 weeks post the election for the government to commission a review headed by former Governor Malcolm McCusker, who of course is an eminent person. But the government set the terms of reference for the review, and Malcolm McCusker yesterday said it was almost inevitable, given those terms of reference, that they would come up the answer that they came up with when it comes to the upper house. That means that the existing system of 6 electorates, 3 in the city and 3 in the country, will be abolished. At the moment, there are 36 MLCs, East Metro, South Metro, North Metro, and then mining and pastoral, agricultural and southwest. Those electorates would be abolished. They would be replaced basically by a statewide electorate in which if you get about 45,000 votes, then that earns you a quota and one of the seats in the upper house. It means that there is no guarantees about regional representation, indeed no guarantees about metro representation. But the real politic of it is this. It is likely to favour the Labor Party compared to the status quo situation, at the expense most probably of the Nationals, but potentially the Independents too, though that is not guaranteed. You can make an argument, if you would like to, that the existing system is unfair and it is weighted towards country West Australians. And you can make an argument that this new system is in a pure sense much fairer and much more equal. And indeed, that is what Mark McGowan has argued. And I think it is reasonable to make that argument. What I find staggering, though, is the manner in which this has been introduced. Just a flagrant downplaying of the prospects of this happening before the election. And then the minute that the government gets control of both houses after the election, here we are. And it is also a statement of priorities too. There are many things on the government's plate at the moment. This, they have decided, is an urgent one. Mia Davies is the opposition leader and the leader of the National Party. She joins me on 6PR Breakfast. Mia, good morning.
Good morning, Gareth.
Is your party going to be decimated by these changes?
No, we won't be. I think if anybody's been watching and playing along with political fortunes for some time, the demise of the National Party was spelt when the Labor Party brought in one vote, one value ahead of the 2008 state election. We were predicted to have just 2 seats left. What we do as an organisation is simply adapt to find ways to make sure regional communities have the representation they deserve. And it really does challenge me that this comes down to us worrying about our own political hides. I am genuinely concerned that we will lose regional voices no matter which political party is in the parliament, in the parliament where we make decisions that impact these people's lives. And the cynicism that the people of Western Australia and more generally around the world have for politicians is because of things like the Premier has done and the words that he's used in relation to this matter. You just played that clip where he was asked repeatedly whether or not this issue was on the agenda before the election, so people could make a decision about whether or not that was important to them. And it wasn't. He said it again and again and again. So this is a broken promise, and now them using this massive majority they have to pursue what I think will have real ramifications for our whole state, not just for regional West Australians, and they didn't go to the polls on it.
So despite his thumping election win, you say he has no mandate to introduce this policy?
Worse than that, he actually denied that it was an issue they were going to pursue. So what they've done is allowed their candidates and all of their members that were running in the election to go out there, and they haven't been truthful with the electorates. And if I think about some of the electorates where they gained, and I'm also thinking about decisions like they've made since the election on native forestry, which I understand is a very popular one in some areas of the state, but in others it would have completely changed the outcome in my view. They have used the majority and are using that majority instead of actually asking the people that it's going to impact. And they should have done that before the election, and the Premier should not have been untruthful when he was asked by you, by other journalists, by the opposition. It's a broken promise, and it doesn't bode well for the next 3 years as we see them decide what else they're going to introduce without having asked the electorate.
Since the start of parliamentary democracy in this state, there has been a rural gerrymander, if I can use that shorthand. That is that the votes of country people have tended to be worth more than the votes of city people. There is an argument that says that these changes remove that. They make it far more equal, yes?
Well, I think there's also a requirement to look at the fact we have two houses of parliament, and in the Legislative Assembly we have one vote, one value, albeit where there are some seats where they are just so big you can't get the same number of people into them because we don't have enough people in regional WA to achieve that. But by all intents and purposes, we have one vote, one value in the House of the People, in the Legislative Assembly. The Legislative Council is a very different beast, and that is the House of Review. And I would think every West Australian would want to have people that understand when they're debating legislation or issues or whatever's come through the Parliament, that there is a view that the people of the Kimberley, some of our most remote communities, the Wheatbelt, the Goldfields, the Southwest and the metropolitan area have that reflected in what we're doing in the Parliament. That is what the House of Review is about. And it's designed at the moment so that there's 3 seats or 3 regions in the metropolitan area and 3 regions in country WA and 6 members for each. That to me balances out. The Legislative Assembly, we already have one vote, one value. That's why my seat is 100,000 square kilometres wide, because that's how big you have to draw a line to capture the same number of voters as you do for an electorate in the middle of Perth.
Just before I let you go, Mia, the election of the daylight savings candidate Wilson Tucker with, I think, 89 votes, whatever it is, has been sort of used by the Premier here as a reason that this has to happen. Surely that's an argument for the ending of group voting tickets rather than this other wholesale change. I mean, that's just a furphy, isn't it?
It was a stalking horse. It's been used as a deflection from what the Premier has done, which is actually break a promise to the electorate because he said it wasn't on the agenda. The opposition is supportive of the changes to the group voting ticket. We have no issue. Didn't before the election. In fact, I think the Greens introduced legislation or tried to in the last Parliament, and the Labor government would not bring it on and debate it. So this could have been dealt with. The issue on the Daylight Savings Party and micro parties harvesting votes could have been dealt with before the last election and wasn't. They're now using it as an excuse to pursue something that the Labor Party has had on their books for years and years and years, and it is completely disingenuous of this Premier to say before the election it wasn't and then make it their first priority in the middle of a global pandemic, Gareth. I mean, where are your priorities, honestly?
Mia Davies, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
The opposition leader and leader of the Nationals, Mia Davies, what do you think? 133882. Claude on the text makes a pretty good point, I reckon. He says, Gareth, mandate aside, the Premier must not disenfranchise country areas for the sake of ensuring some bloke gets a seat with 98 direct votes. Surely there was another way to do this. He has access to brilliant minds and can give him an alternative. Disenfranchising is not the solution. The Premier now finds himself on dangerous ground. Claude, thank you. This will result in a more city-centric politics. It is, if you want to be technical and purist about it, more equal. There is no question about that. That is Mark McGowan's strongest argument. But I think if a political leader says something to you before an election about what they do or do not plan to do, and they totally change it and tear it up after the election, that should have some consequences. I think it should have some consequences, and I wonder whether it will. It'll be up to you, the voters, to decide if in fact it will. So how do you feel about it? 133882.